Since their inception, video games have caused a myriad of controversies. Whether due to their depictions of violence or the inclusion of sex scenes, old white dudes or mothers scared of their own shadows tend to get their panties in a twist whenever a new game comes out which goes against their so-called values.
Night Trap, which adds a new dimension of violence specifically targeted against women, is especially repugnant.
What are you doing now?
Mortal Kombat and Night Trap are not the kind of gifts that responsible parents give.
Some games have even been banned in certain countries. My little island, Australia, has had a long history of refusing classification for games, thus ensuring they can't be sold in the country. The main reason a game is refused classification is the inclusion of either sexual violence or drugs being used as a benefit for the player. In these cases, most devs make slight changes to their games to get them successfully classified. Even though we have an R18+ adults rating for games, this song and dance continues to happen. But one thing I have never heard of is a government and citizens fighting for a game never to be released. But not because it includes anything I just mentioned. Even my country's stupid classification board was gonna let this game I am talking about today to be released. No, this game caused such a furor because one small thing in the game criticized the leader of a country, and no matter what the developers do to appease said country, they still do whatever they can to make sure this game stays buried. I'm talking about Detention, developed by Red Candle Games, and the country is China. In this video, I will tell you the detailed story of its developer, their previous work, the development and release of Detention, and then what caused the Chinese government to pull it from stores, the shitstorm that occurred after, how the creators continue to fight to get their games in the hands of horror fans, and how, after many years, they were finally successful. This is Detention, the horror game that refused to die. Red Candle Games is a Taiwanese video game developer based in Taipei, Taiwan, founded in 2015. The first game they created was Detention, or Returning to School in Chinese. Released on January 13th, 2017 for PC and PS4, Nintendo Switch, and Android phones at a later date, Detention is a 2D side-scrolling psychological horror game set in 1960s Taiwan when the country was under a period of martial law called the White Terror, which aimed to suppress political dissidents. Around 140,000 Taiwanese people were imprisoned during this time, and as many as 4,000 people were executed. Detention follows two students, Wei and Ray, who find themselves trapped in Greenwood High School. The school has changed, and its halls are now haunted by evil creatures called the Lingered. While trying to avoid these monsters, the two students slowly uncover the dark past of their school. Upon its release, Detention was praised by reviewers, and has a score of 83 on Metacritic. It also received an overwhelmingly positive reception from users on Steam. Detention topped the game ranking on Steam in Taiwan, and made its way to number 6 on Steam's global ranking just 3 days after it was released. As well as achieving positive reviews, Red Candle Games showed us that they weren't afraid of using their history within their games to tell compelling and dark stories. Following the successful release of Detention, Red Candle Games began work on their second title, Detention. Detention spent 2 years in development and was going to be Red Candle Games' first attempt at a 3D game. The 12-person team had to learn how to use the Unity 3D game engine alongside learning how to create a horror game in 3D. Initially intended to be a much smaller scale 3D horror demo that only lasted about 15 minutes without much gameplay or narrative. As the team invested more time into the project, the scope of the game greatly expanded, both in terms of gameplay and the story. The 15-minute demo idea wouldn't satisfy their creative needs and was abandoned in place of creating a full game, taking inspiration from many other works of horror across many mediums outside of video games. Quote, "We spent much of our pre-production development phase researching, including classical and modern horror films. For example, we were greatly inspired by the visual composition and sound design of the film Hereditary, books about religion, and local news from the 1980s. But the developers did also draw inspiration from video games, titles such as What Remains of Edith Finch and Layers of Fear, and most significantly, Hideo Kojima's PT, the playable teaser for the since-cancelled Silent Hills game. Press F to pay respects, boys and girls." The developers said they were blown away by the craftsmanship of PT. Quote, "The atmosphere and the pace of the game were executed flawlessly. As both gamers and developers, it really motivated us to recreate something similar in the horror genre. One of the main things they wanted to expand upon was PT's small lived-in setting. They chose an apartment, wanted it to be as realistic as possible, so they actually built it from an existing layout, as some of their colleagues' relatives still lived in apartments such as the one in the game. They chose this setting because they wanted to take something associated with comfort and contort it into something terrifying. Quote, "We expect our home to be a place of safety and security. While the home is the place where the family gathered and spent time together, it is also the one place to hide any hideous secrets that may not be observed by outsiders. And the dark history of any house created by its residents, along with the things that they've done, in my opinion, is what makes a home truly terrifying." Red Candle Games managed to keep that small apartment environment interesting and engaging by utilizing a non-linear form of storytelling. The player would time jump to various points in the lives of the family living in the apartment. As the years progress, elements of the apartment became sinister. In the early years, it looked like any old family home, but as time progresses and the family becomes more and more broken, things in the apartment reflect that. The IGN review of the game gave 3 spoiler-free examples of this. The first was the living room, once clean and organised, that becomes dishevelled, with religious altars placed everywhere and creepy lights installed on the ceiling. The second was the daughter's bedroom, once filled with cute shit and the usual stuff you would find in a young girl's bedroom, which transforms into a storage place for a pile of books. The last was that photos of the wife suddenly changed to have her eyes gouged out. Yeah, Devotion does wear its inspirations on its sleeves. Another feature taken from titles like PT and Layers of Fear was the looping system in Impossible Space, which they planned to use to scare the player. Red Candle Games didn't just replicate that system, but instead expanded upon it to make it their own. Achieving this was a constant issue for the developers, so they created a design flow to help them nail down how they were going to terrify the player. Quote, "First we created a written script along with the storyboard for the whole team to discuss. However, as everyone imagined each motion in the game differently, we started to work on a motion storyboard by recording and editing actual footage. Before the artist worked on a scene in the game, the team would continue to adjust the motion storyboard until everyone was satisfied with its effect. As well as scaring players through visuals, sound design was an indispensable tool to draw the player into the terrifying moment the team had created. Quote, "After all, our eye view is limited, only tracking what's happening in front of us, but sounds don't have such a limitation. Thus, with the effort of both the programmers and sound designers, players can hear and detect all the subtle sounds from any direction in the apartment. That's how we lead the players into our trap, to initiate the scary moments of the least expected timing." The last major focus of their design flow was playtesting to ensure what they had created was actually scary. Quote, "Toward the end of production, every week we would invite different playtesters to come in and play our game in the office. By observing their reactions, we made revisions accordingly, making sure each scene is properly staged and timed. Though Devotion's horror inspirations are obvious, it's clear that the team at Red Candle aimed to create a game that represented the culture, folklore, and the religious society of Taiwan to build a rich and compelling world. They also wanted to make Devotion something that felt familiar to Taiwanese players. Quote, "Taiwan is a country that rarely gets displayed and showcased in games, which in a way plays to our advantage. They achieved this by making the setting and background Devotion reminiscent of the memories of the team's childhoods, and by drawing from Taiwanese society as a whole." Quote, "1980s Taiwan was a time of economic boom, the growing entertainment industry, and the rising of popular culture. Red Candle Games said during this period, the media often depicted the successful stories of hardworking, talented, persevering people, which was not the reality for the vast majority of Taiwanese people. Quote, We saw people strangled by the stress and ideas like, as long as you work hard, you will succeed, and why can't you be as successful as others? They said many Taiwanese people struggle due to the unrealistic expectations from their peers, family, and society. Quote, as a result, many people decided to seek out supernatural powers for guidance when there were no real solutions to real life problems. Devotion is a title that delves into such emotions and contradictions. The original soundtrack was composed by Taiwanese composer Vincent Yang and aimed to capture the ambience of Taiwan in the 1980s. It incorporates traditional Asian instruments, as well as folk music elements to capture that specific decade in Taiwan. The soundtrack also includes music by Taiwanese indie band No Party for Cow Dong, which I think I've pronounced terribly wrong there. They wrote and performed the title track for the game, alongside an original song called Lady of the Pier, which plays during the game and in the ending. Devotion was set up to be an ambitious title for Red Candle Games, which forced them to step out of their comfort zone to create the horror game they envisioned, but the talented team worked extremely hard in order to create something truly special and terrifying. Set in the 1980s, Devotion follows a family who have been torn apart after years of rejection, forfeited dreams, and illness. The player controls Feng Yu, an acclaimed screenwriter whose career has stagnated and is desperately struggling to find work. He lives in an apartment in Taipei with his wife, Gongli Fang, a former singer and actress who abandoned her successful career to devote all of her time to raising their daughter. She is 11-year-old Du Mei Xin, who has just found out she is also a talented singer and wants to follow in her mother's footsteps, but she comes to a mysterious illness and the doctors have no idea why she is sick. Feng Yu becomes obsessed with finding a cure for his daughter. However, when he doesn't receive the answers he wants from medical professionals, his neighbour upstairs offers him an unorthodox solution to his problem, but Feng Yu has no idea how much he will come to regret that decision. On February 21st, 2019, just 2 days after the release of Devotion, keen-eyed players found a Fulu talisman on a wall in the game, which is a term for supernatural Taoist incantations and magic symbols as a Chinese incantation. The Fulu contained the words Xi Jinping Winnie the Pooh, written in Chinese seal script. This was in reference to a Chinese meme which compared the Chinese General Secretary to Winnie the Pooh, which he doesn't like. Alongside this, the talisman included the words you see on this screen. I am too scared to say it as there's no way I'm pronouncing that correctly. This phrase sounds similar to a Mandarin phrase which translates to "your mother is a moron." Chinese gamers interpreted the words on the Fulu talisman to be an insult to the leader of China. They weren't too happy about this and review-bombed Devotion on Steam, causing the game to go from having an overwhelmingly positive review score to a mostly negative one. Many of the negative reviews on Steam claim the offensive material was not a placeholder item or a mistake, but instead that the developers were deliberately including their political views in the game. They also claimed Red Candle Games baited Chinese gamers into buying the game, believing Devotion was tricking mainlanders into supporting Taiwanese independence from China, and that the hidden politics ruined the game for them. In response to the criticism from Chinese gamers, Red Candle Games said the Fulu talisman was a placeholder object they intended to remove, and apologised for offending Chinese gamers. Quote, when the material was made, each teammate was busy working on one's own tasks while chasing the deadline. None of the other colleagues were aware of this. It was until we received a private report made by a player on the 21st of February that we realised what was exactly written on that art material. Red Candle Studios said they patched out the Fulu talisman within an hour and replaced it with another which reads Happy New Year. But this did little to alleviate the outrage, as many aspects of Devotion were also considered insults to China, and false statements attributed to Red Candle Games were shared on social media. The shitstorm worsened after the developer's Weibo account was shut down. For those who don't know, Weibo is an extremely popular Chinese social media website, and for Red Candle Games to have their account removed was a massive blow to the developers. On February 23rd, just 4 days after Devotion was released, it was completely removed from the Chinese Steam store. Combined with the game's removal from Steam in China, led publishers in Deviant and Winking Skywalker to cut ties with Red Candle Games. The developer also had to compensate the publishers for the financial loss caused by the controversy. The co-founders of Red Candle Games released a statement on their Steam page addressing the claims they hid political views in the game and tricked Chinese gamers into buying Devotion, and the loss of the two publishers. The statement suggested that that their situation had become much worse. Quote, "It's not Red Candle Games' vision to secretly project extensive ideology, nor is it to attack any person in the real world. Even if the sensitive art element was wrongfully placed before, we kindly ask you not to overinterpret other game material. As a game company, Red Candle Games' only goal is to provide an impressive and good playing experience to all. However, we have failed our players' anticipation and offended many others due to the said mistake. For that, we are awfully sorry and devastated. Again, we would like to reaffirm that the severe art material mistake is made by Red Candle Games. It has nothing to do with any of our partners. Red Candle Games takes full responsibility and bear all the condemns. We sincerely hope that this ends with Red Candle Games, and please do not take it out on innocent partners." They went on to say they hoped everyone remained calm and shifted their focus back to the core message of the game. Quote, "After all, it is a mistake to insert the unrelatable material to the game content. Not only does it destroy how people experience the game, but also affect many more people. It is our regret to say this is not Red Candle Games' original aim for game development." But this statement did little to quell the flames of outrage, and on February 25th, Red Candle Games removed the game from Steam globally and released a statement explaining why. Quote, "Due to technical issues that cause unexpected crashes, among other reasons, we are pulling Devotion off from the Steam store to have another company QA check." They also said they would take this opportunity to ease the heightened pressure in their community, which came from what they described as their previous art material incident. Quote, "Our team would also review our game material once again, making sure no other unintended materials were inserted in. Hopefully, this would help our audience to focus on the game itself again upon its return." Many people believe the reason given by Red Candle Games as to why they pulled Devotion off Steam may not be true, pointing to the fact that, besides a few rare examples, a developer never pulls a game off Steam to work on technical issues unless it is completely broken. They would just release a patch to fix any issues. Others believe their motivations were to reset the reviews, but the vast majority of people believe the reason Devotion was pulled from Steam is because of the Chinese government, as an excuse of technical issues is allegedly used by companies who have released censored digital content or content that has been taken down in China. Things for Red Candle Games went from pretty shitty to absolutely shitty in July 2019. The Chinese government had announced they had revoked the business license of Deviant, who are the Chinese publisher for Red Candle Games, due to the publisher violating relevant laws. What those relevant laws weren't revealed, apparently not deemed relevant enough, but they were allegedly related to the controversies surrounding Devotion. Many Taiwanese developers were worried about what implications this move would have for the Taiwanese game industry, as they receive much of their funding from China. Red Candle released a statement shortly after the announcement where they apologized to Deviant and players who are unable to purchase Devotion. Quote, "For the past 4 months, the art asset incident related to Devotion has caused immeasurable harm to Red Candle Games and our partner. We would like to offer our most sincere apology to all impacted teams and personnel." The developer said they assumed all responsibility for their losses associated with the controversy and would continue to work as hard as they could to prevent the damage from worsening. The sadder news that came with this announcement was Red Candle's co-founders reached a unanimous decision to not re-release Devotion in the near future, which included, but was not limited to, obtaining profits from sales, reviews, IP authorization, etc., to prevent what they described as unnecessary misconception. Quote, "As we reflect on the situation, we notice many players, industry friends, and the media are starting to understand that the incident was indeed a malfunction of project management, not a deliberate act. If, in the future, the public would be willing to view the game rationally and allow us the opportunity to rebuild trust of our players, Red Candle would reconsider re-releasing Devotion." Any new information regarding the release of Devotion ceased until June 2020, when Red Candles announced they would begin running pre-orders for a physical edition of the game. The physical edition would include a mock VHS tape and cover, a book, a sticker, and a more expensive version also included the game's soundtrack. The game itself came on a memory stick. Pre-orders would run from June 18 to June 15, but unfortunately the physical edition would only be available in Taiwan. Some sneaky Westerners worked around this limitation and were able to get a physical version.
You bastard!
But there is a silver lining for us horror gamers, which came absolutely out of nowhere. On December 16th, 2020, the Red Candle Games Twitter account came to life and announced that Devotion would be releasing on GOG's store on December 18th, and horror Twitter rejoiced. It was magical, and everyone was so keen for Devotion to finally be released. That lasted for a few hours. Shortly after the announcement we had all been waiting for, GOG's Twitter account popped into the chat and said, quote, "Earlier today, it was announced that the game Devotion is coming to GOG. After receiving many messages from gamers, we have decided not to list the game in our store." With this, horror and general gaming Twitter joined forces, grabbed their pitchfork and torches, and set GOG on fire. Oof, that ratio. You love to see it. You see, GOG is owned by CD Projekt, who have a department for developing original games called CD Projekt Red, and the announcement of GOG pulling Devotion from their store came shortly after the absolute terrible release of their highly anticipated game Cyberpunk 2077. People were already pissed at the company for the cursed Cyberpunk 2077, and the Devotion announcement added fuel to that fire. Many people, myself included, questioned GOG's statement. Who are these gamers that sent them many messages just after the announcement from Red Candle Games? But GOG was never going to say, leaving people to theorize that the company folded to pressure from Chinese gamers and their government. China is a massive market, and pissing off their government is something many companies try very hard to avoid. But GOG and CD Projekt remained silent, despite many people urging them to be more transparent in their decision and quit the gamer bullshit. Red Candle Games released a statement in response the next day, confirming Devotion would not be available on GOG. Quote, "Though regretful, but we are willing to understand and respect GOG's decision. For the players looking forward to Devotion's re-release, please accept our most sincere apology. This is a difficult predicament to overcome, but we won't stop striving." Besides that last statement, Red Candle Games have been completely silent since the GOG debacle. But those four small but powerful words in the statement, "we won't stop striving," mean I'm still optimistic. I don't know the individual developers personally, but the one thing I have gathered from looking at their work and how they talk about it in interviews is they are extremely passionate and dedicated. I believe they want Devotion out in the wild more than anyone else, not only so they can make money from the title, but because they are proud of their game and want to share it with the world. And I honestly thought that was the sad end to this story. But while I was working on this video, something beautiful happened. On the 15th of March 2021, the Red Candle Games Twitter account came alive again after months of silence, to say the words we all wanted to hear. Devotion is now available on their store. And yet again, horror and gaming Twitter rejoiced. After years of censorship, debacles, and fights to get their game out to players, Red Candle Games finally did it. They released Devotion. The original title of this video was Devotion, the horror game you're not allowed to play, but I am so happy that I get to change that title, despite how bloody good it was. Red Candle's story is one of determination and to never quit no matter how much the odds are stacked against them. All of their hard work, trials and tribulations have finally paid off, and for that I want to say congratulations Red Candle Games, you did it. And if you want to play the horror game you weren't allowed to play for so long, there will be a link to Devotion's store page in the description. Show the devs some love and support they rightfully deserve. Thank you for watching this video of mine. If you liked it, why not give it a like and subscribe to the channel. I apologise for the lack of videos lately, and the next video wasn't the Visage review as promised. Life has fucked me over completely over the past few months and I'm only just getting back on track. I promise my next video will be the Visage review, but it may take me a little while because it is massive. Thank you to Cassie Clower yet again for editing my script, and Wild Potato Industries for his help with the script as well. You should go sub to his channel because he's a bloody awesome person and I love him and he makes great content. And a massive thank you to my supporters over on Patreon. I will be closing down my Patreon as I haven't been able to provide the extra content I promised due to health reasons. I may reactivate it again later, but for now, I just want to get back into making videos on this channel. If you want to join my Discord, links will be in the description. Thank you for all the support, and as always, stay spooky.